I sighed as I looked at the legs sticking out from under the vehicle. Slade, I just don't get it,
Don't think too far into it, kid. It's just a dream.
he mumbled from underneath. He was invested in working as hard as he could, knowing this would be his last day in his shop. It wasn't that he wanted to leave it, but Slade thought it was more important to protect us on whatever reckless adventure we would be up to. Plus, he was pretty sure our aunt would never let him live it down if something happened to her daughter, adopted or not. In any other circumstances, I might have agreed with him, but not for this. It feels so real, though. It has to mean something. He rolled himself out from underneath the vehicle, hands holding onto the bumper. His coveralls were tied around his waist, leaving him in a plain t-shirt that was covered in oil. His red hair was tied back, and he had gone a bit too long without a shave on the sides. They were more than fuzzy or stubbled at this point. The man was all too invested in his work.
Karri, dreams are just dreams. You're not going to run into some shadow person in some weird planet field.
I couldn't help but roll my eyes at his comment, but a voice from the loft up above rang out then. Maybe it's your soulmate. A face popped over the edge of the loft, and I saw her. The tan skin, the blonde hair hanging down as she stared at us upside down. Slade, you don't have to be such a pessimist. He grumbled something to himself, but I saw him smile as he rolled himself back under the vehicle.
I'm just saying, it's more likely just some weird dream.
Gabby laughed, and I sighed. Well, I think it's romantic. You've been dreaming about him for years. Gabby, you know it could be anyone, not just a guy, I told her. But her enthusiasm even had me grinning. She disappeared from the edge of the loft. At first, Slade had shouted at her for even trying to go up there, but now she was constantly up there to grab more tea or make him a coffee. I'm just saying, someone that mysterious and silent, it has got to be a guy. I mean, have you even met Slade? The sound of a tool dropping caught my attention, followed by a murmur of,
I'm not mysterious.
Slade, do you want a coffee? The sweet voice asked from up above. I turned around, putting my attention to the travel mug and grinder, filled with powder that I had set on the workbench in preparation for the day. They exchanged words in the background, but I didn't hear much of what they were saying as I poured the powder into the mug, picking up the spoon that was next to it to stir it in. The dark red liquid was raspberry tea, specially made by my aunt out of her garden. How much did you put in there exactly? Gabby asked as I stirred, and I realized she was behind me. Sometimes it was terrifying how quiet she was when she moved. We just want to knock him out for a couple of hours. I moved to hide the prescription bottle, knowing she wouldn't approve. She was quicker, though, and as she read it, she groaned. Opening it, she poured the one pill that was left out onto her palm. Karri, there were 30 pills in here. Are you trying to kill him? She exclaimed, trying to grab the mug from me. I pulled it out of her reach, putting the lid on. Don't worry about it. There weren't 30 left. There were only 17. She didn't look reassured by my words, and I saw her pick her phone from her pocket and open it up, typing something in. She shook her head frantically. No, we'll find another way. We'll ask him nicely. Karri, 16 is enough to cause liver failure in someone. I knew she was right, but there was a feeling in the back of my mind that this would work, and my feelings had always been right. If this was the first time it wasn't, we would already be on the run anyways. It's going to be okay. I can feel it, Gabby. She looked conflicted for a moment before speaking. Karri, you know I trust you, but this seems like overkill. As in, you're literally going to be the death of him.
What are you arguing about?
Slade asked roughly, rolling up from underneath and getting to his feet. He wiped his hands on his coveralls and looked at the prescription bottle that Gabby was still holding in her hand.
That's mine. What did you do, Karri?
Of course he blamed me. He wouldn't blame Gabby for anything. She could do no wrong in his eyes. Don't worry, there's still one left. You can just get some more from your doctor. He held his hand out for the bottle while still shooting daggers at me with his eyes. I left you one, Slade. We needed it. It's not a big deal. We'll get you more.
Karri, that's not how that works.
He shouted at me, and I frowned, shoving the travel mug into my backpack.
Fine, whatever.
He slammed the bottle onto the workbench before walking back to the vehicle he was working on.
You should get out of here and get to school. I'm not going to be the damn reason you guys are late.
Gabby stared after him and moved as if she were going to talk, but I tugged her arm gently, shaking my head. Right now, he just needed to get the anger out on his own. Everything he had known for years, the shop, his family, was about to change. The anger wasn't only about the medication. Not really. It was about everything he was giving up and every fear he had about the world he was entering into. Slade Ryder, military mechanic, turned into a fugitive stealing a government ship. She sighed quietly, for a moment looking as if her heart was sinking. She turned back once we were at the door. "I'll see you at lunch hour, Slade?" she asked. He leaned against the vehicle and waved a hand at her. He may have been angry with me, but he couldn't stay mad at her. She was the light that filled his shop. Her frown turned into a smile quickly as she saw him, and she waved back before exiting and closing the door. We walked in silence for a few minutes until I looked over to her and saw the sheepish, silly smile on her face. She had it bad and was as stubborn as he was about admitting it. You should just go for it." "What are you talking about?" she asked me, not meeting my eyes. I could tell by how she bit her lip and avoided my eyes that she knew exactly what I was talking about. She put her backpack over her shoulders, and I could see a blush creeping into her cheeks. "He's a great mentor." I rolled my eyes, gently shoving her with my hip. She stumbled slightly but chuckled, continuing the walk to school. "I mean, you're both ridiculous, and don't give me that bullshit about him being a great mentor." "Let's just not talk about it, okay? He's way too old for me." Clearly, it was a conversation she didn't want to have, but we were going to have it. I was determined. "Sure, he's older. You're of age, though. It's really not that bad. Please, if anyone knows about wanting an older guy, it's me." The words slipped from my mouth without even needing to think about it, and her eyes widened. "Karri Ryder! Have you been talking to someone and not telling me?" Gabby asked in a shocked voice. "Who is it?" "It's not that. I don't know. It must have been from before the accident. I can't remember." I pressed a hand to my forehead. It was always difficult when random memories popped up, but the therapist my aunt had sent me to had reminded me not to rush things, that they would come to me when I was ready. I glanced up at the school down the street. We only had half a day to go until we never had to be there again. "You're right. We shouldn't talk about it," I mumbled, and could see Gabby looking concerned out of the corner of my eye. "We have more important things to worry about than some older guy I may have known in the past." She hesitated, but quickly realized it was best to divert from that subject. "Yeah, like worrying about the guy our age that you're about to kidnap." "Hey, that was your idea. I just picked him out," I whispered, trying to keep my voice down so no one could hear our conversation as we approached the school. She looked sad as she stared at the school walls. Then she spoke. "I've been in this town my whole life. Now we're here, running away with Slade Ryder of all the people in the world. Do you know how much I used to admire watching his work?" I didn't need to respond to that. I remembered the look on her face the first time she showed up at my aunt's place and he had answered the door. I thought she was going to die right there. "I'm so excited to go, and I'm so excited to see where this takes me. It's just going to be different and terrifying and wonderful." Her eyes were filled with thrill as well as fear, and I wrapped an arm around her shoulders lightly, watching as her frown turned to a smile. "But you'll be there, and him, and Blazer, and the new kid. It'll be like a little family eventually." As we stepped into the school doors, she whispered, "Where will we go first?" "Wherever you want. Who's going to stop us?" I asked, approaching my locker and opening the lock. She was across the almost empty hall. We had shown up early so that we could be prepared for when he got there. The new kid, who Gabby had agreed to. Slade had hated that we were bringing someone from high school, but it just felt right, and I was sticking to that. Gabby was by my side quickly, nudging me with her elbow and whispering, "He's here. Should we talk to him?" I took the mug out of my backpack and turned to look at him as I shut my locker door. His dark hair could have blended into any crowd, but those eyes stood out no matter what. The blue was almost too vivid to be real, and when he looked back at you, it was all that existed in the world. At least I thought so. Gabby would laugh and say she didn't have that particular problem with him. Yet whenever he walked into the room, it was like my mind just knew and wanted me to go there. "Jace," I said with a nod as he walked closer. His own locker was only a few down from Gabby's, which she had been thrilled to know on his first day at the school months ago. He looked at me and grinned for a moment before turning to his locker.
"Ryder,"
was his response. He only used my last name when I used his, which ended up being most of the time.
"Why do you look so suspicious?"
"How would you feel about joining us for lunch today? I notice you've been sitting alone. Makes it easier for the vultures to swoop down." He turned, lifting an eyebrow as he looked at me.
"The vultures?"
"Don't act like you haven't noticed. You're popular for someone who acts like he doesn't want to be here." That was exactly why he was so popular. He didn't want to be in the middle of the crowd, but there was something about him no one could deny was different than the people in this town. "It's lunch." Gabby was too shy to ask. Gabby looked up at me with wide eyes, knowing full well it was a lie. When she saw my eyes, though, she looked over at him. "I told her not to tell you, but yeah, I'd really like it. Her aunt made us some of her handmade tea." She smiled at him, and I knew he would have difficulty saying no to her. He grabbed a binder from his locker and shut it after setting his bag inside.
"Well, since you asked, Gabby, sure."
He grinned at her and then looked at me. He knew I had been the one wanting him to join us, but I could tell he wasn't about to say it. "Great, we'll see you during lunch then," I said before ushering Gabby off with me, looking back at him briefly. His eyes were following us as we left, but he shook his head and walked down a different hallway, finally letting me release the breath I had held as we walked away. That didn't go unnoticed by Gabby, though. "Did you really just stop breathing?" she asked. I didn't answer. "You did! Karri, we can't have him there if he's going to be that much of a distraction. He'll be the death of you if you never breathe around him." I was just nervous. "Don't read too far into it, Gabby," I muttered as we entered the classroom. "He just makes me nervous." "Yeah, well, your brother makes me nervous, but I don't stop breathing around him," she exclaimed. I couldn't help but laugh. "No, you just go hide under a vehicle when anything gets tense. So much better." I teased her and she went red as she took her seat. Let's just face the facts. We both have terrible coping mechanisms. When the bell finally rang for lunch later that day, I took a deep breath, looking around the class. He was sitting at the other end, and as I turned around, I caught his eyes on me. When mine met his, he didn't look away, just crossed his arms and grinned before getting to his feet. He seemed so frustratingly confident, and it was driving me nuts. He had every reason to be confident. I'd never seen the guy fail a test or even struggle in PE. Rayner Jace was a very fortunate part of the school, which was keeping up averages single-handedly, and I hated every second of it. Yet, he didn't even bother looking at anyone. It was like he tried to keep entirely to himself and not get too close. In any other case, I would have just admitted to myself that he was the weird loner kid in the town and called it a day. However, when it came to him, I just couldn't help myself. There was something about him that just made him seem familiar. Then, there was the side of me that imagined him out of the sweater he always seemed to wear, which made me even more frustrated than anything he did could. I shook my head free of thoughts and looked at him again. I got to my feet and nodded my head towards the door. He lifted an eyebrow and walked with me to the door, even though it looked like he was slightly hesitating. Anyone could tell something was up with me and Gabby. Someone who seemed smart like him would have figured it out by now. Ready? I asked, holding my books in my arm.
Sure. Why are we doing this again?
He wondered, but still followed. I rolled my eyes. Because you look like you need some friends here. It's been months, Juliet, and you haven't really interacted with anyone. It was a lame reference to a school play we had both tried out for, but it made him smile and shake his head.
All right. Can't say no to Romeo. Although I'm pretty sure that's how they both died. You're not going to kill me, are you?
Not if my master plan works out, I said in a teasing voice. You'll still be alive when I'm done with you.